The entire lounge held its breath. Chairman Park Tae-seong, the most feared man in Seoul's underworld, had just humiliated the black waitress Naomi for a mistake she didn't make. He thought she was submissive. He thought she was disposable. He was wrong. Instead of bowing in apology, Naomi lifted her chin, locked eyes with the chairman, and corrected him, not in Seoul Korean, but in a razor-sharp Gyeongsang-do dialect laced with Ha-Sosiochi royal court honorifics that hadn't been spoken in the syndicate for 50 years. The air crystallized. Park Jun-ho's hand froze halfway to the Glock beneath his tailored jacket. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just a waitress. She was a shadow from a blood-soaked past his family had tried to erase, and she was the only one who could save his father's life. The kitchen of the Obsidian Vault, Cheongdam-dong's most ruthlessly exclusive underground lounge, smelled of charred wagyu, aged soju, and pure, unadulterated panic. Mr. Kim, the floor manager, was 3 minutes away from a complete nervous breakdown. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief, his eyes darting between the chrome kitchen doors and the VIP elevator that descended directly into the subterranean dining hall. It was 8:55 p.m. The Parks would arrive in 5 minutes, and if anything went wrong tonight, Kim wouldn't just lose his job. He'd lose considerably more. "Naomi," he hissed, snapping his fingers in her face. She didn't flinch. At 24, Naomi Stephen had perfected the art of being a ghost. She wore her natural hair pulled back so severely it made her scalp ache, and she'd adopted the posture of someone perpetually apologizing for taking up space. In a city where being black and female already made her a curiosity, she'd learned to weaponize invisibility. "Yes, Mr. Kim," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're on tea service tonight. Only tea. Had on green tea, temperature maintained at exactly 70 degrees Celsius. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact. Do not even think too loudly. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." Naomi adjusted her crisp white uniform, her dark skin contrasting sharply against the fabric. "But who's coming that has you so?" Kim looked at her as if she'd just asked whether gravity was real. "The Parks, Naomi. Chairman Park Tae-seong and his son Jun-ho. The entire VIP level has been rented. Expected spend, 300 million. If you so much as breathe incorrectly, I will personally ensure you disappear from Korea forever." Naomi felt ice water trickle down her spine. The Parks. Even after 7 years in Seoul, even in the carefully constructed bubble of her false identity, she knew that name. Everyone knew that name. They owned shipping companies, real estate conglomerates, and half the politicians in the National Assembly. But that was just the surface. Underneath, they were the iron fist of Seoul's criminal underworld. She turned back to the tea station, her hands trembling as she arranged the delicate porcelain cups. She wasn't trembling from fear of the Park's reputation, though. She was trembling because the name Park triggered memories she'd spent 7 years trying to bury. Memories of her father's voice on a crackling phone line, memories of a midnight escape from Busan, and memories of a life stolen in a hail of bullets meant to erase her family's legacy forever. "Just keep your head down," she told herself, gripping the tea tray until her knuckles went pale. "You're just Naomi the waitress. You're nobody." But deep in her chest, beneath the layers of carefully constructed invisibility, a voice whispered the truth her father had taught her before he died. "You are never nobody, Naomi. You are Marcus Stephen's daughter, and when the time comes, you'll know exactly what to do." Before we begin, if you enjoy intense mafia stories with powerful female leads, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. "Hey," a soft voice broke through Naomi's spiraling thoughts. It was Jae-woo, the sous chef, his kind eyes filled with concern. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Naomi lied, forcing her lips into a weak smile. "Just Mr. Kim being intense tonight." "It's the Parks," Jae-woo muttered, checking the temperature on a pan of galbi. "Word is Chairman Tae-seong lost a major deal in Busan last week. Won 50 billion down the drain. He's looking for someone to bleed." Naomi didn't respond. She focused on the tea leaves steeping in the ceramic pot, watching the dark tendrils swirl like smoke. Busan. That word was a knife between her ribs. Naomi, listen to me. Her father's voice echoed across 7 years, as clear as if Marcus Stephen were standing beside her in the kitchen. She'd been 17, barely holding back tears as he zipped her into a winter coat 3 sizes too big. When I'm gone, you become a ghost. You blend in. You work honest jobs. You never speak the old tongue. Promise me. She'd promised. She'd kept that promise through English teaching gigs in Itaewon, through late shifts at convenience stores, through the endless invisibility of being a black woman in a country that didn't know what to do with her. She'd buried Marcus Stephen's daughter so deep that some days, even she forgot who she used to be. But her father had trained her too well. The muscle memory didn't forget. When she walked, it was with tactical awareness, exits mapped, sight lines calculated, threats assessed. When she poured tea, her hands never shook, even when they should. And when she heard certain words, Busan, the Parks, the Syndicate, her body coiled like a weapon waiting for the trigger. "You're not just my daughter," Marcus had told her the night before he died, his calloused hands gripping her shoulders. "You're the insurance policy. If anything happens to me, you're the only one who knows where all the bodies are buried. Literally." "Naomi," Mr. Kim's shrill voice shattered the memory. "They're here, line up now." The kitchen staff scrambled into formation near the service entrance. Naomi took her place at the end of the line, head bowed, tea tray balanced perfectly in her hands. Through the chrome doors, she could hear the elevator descending, a low, mechanical hum that felt like a countdown. The doors opened. The entourage didn't walk. They prowled. 6 men in total, 4 of them clearly security, walls of muscle poured into designer suits, earpieces glinting, eyes scanning the room with predatory precision. They moved like her father's old team used to move, and that recognition sent electricity down her spine. But the 2 men at the center absorbed all the oxygen in the room. Park Jun-ho entered first. He was devastating, easily 6 feet tall with shoulders that filled his midnight blue suit like a promise of violence. His hair was styled with calculated precision, and his face could have been carved from marble if marble could look that dangerous. He didn't glance at the staff. He assessed them, his shark-like eyes cataloging weaknesses, measuring threats, calculating probabilities. When his gaze swept past Naomi, she felt it like a physical touch, cold, analytical, and far too perceptive. Then came Chairman Park Tae-seong. He moved slowly, deliberately, a man who'd learned that speed was for the desperate. He wore a charcoal 3-piece suit that probably cost more than Naomi's yearly rent, and his silver hair was swept back from a face that was a map of violence. Deep lines around a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile, eyes dark as winter nights, and an expression of such absolute authority that even the air seemed to bow. Mr. Kim nearly prostrated himself. "Chairman Park, Mr. Jun-ho, it is the honor of a lifetime to welcome you to the Obsidian Vault. Your table is prepared." "The tea," Chairman Park interrupted, his voice like gravel grinding against steel. "Is it the Hadong first flush I requested?" Yes, of course," Kim squeaked. "Personally sourced, temperature-controlled, we have." "Then stop talking and serve it." Jun-ho's eyes never stopped moving. They landed on Naomi again, lingering this time. She kept her gaze fixed on the polished floor, but she could feel his suspicion like heat from a flame. He was watching the way she held the tray, too steady, too professional, the grip of someone trained in balance and weapons handling. "Blend in," her father's ghost whispered. "Don't let them see you." But Park Jun-ho was already seeing far too much. The VIP level of the Obsidian Vault was a study in controlled opulence. Dim ambient lighting cast long shadows across walls lined with reclaimed wood and brushed steel. The private dining area overlooked the main floor through one-way glass, a king's balcony where Seoul's most dangerous men could watch the world without being seen. Naomi moved like smoke between the tables. She poured the Hadong tea with precision. Her movements economical and silent. The bodyguards flanked the room's perimeter, facing outward, hands resting near concealed weapons. It was just Chairman Park and Jun-ho at the main table, the tension between father and son thick enough to cut. "The Busan port acquisition has stalled," Jun-ho said, not touching the tea Naomi had poured. The labor unions are demanding another 15% increase. Give them 5, Chairman Park grunted, staring at his teacup. And make an example of the union representative who asked for 15. Remind him who built those docks. It's risky, Abiyoji. The prosecutors are watching the union leadership closely right now. I don't pay you to tell me about risks, Junho, the chairman snapped, his eyes flashing with sudden fury. I pay you to eliminate them. You've been cautious since that London incident. Caution is how empires fall. Junho's jaw tightened, a muscle feathering in his cheek. I'm not cautious, I'm strategic. There's a difference. Naomi approached with the first course, a delicate arrangement of Jeju abalone with fermented soybean reduction and pine needle dust. She placed the plates down without a sound. Jeonbok muchim, chairmanim, she murmured, her eyes downcast. Chairman Park barely acknowledged her. He picked up his chopsticks, examined the abalone with the scrutiny of a man who'd eaten $1,000 meals for breakfast, and took a small bite. He chewed slowly. The room held its breath. He set his chopsticks down with deliberate care. Acceptable. Naomi exhaled silently and retreated to the shadows near the service station, her hands clasped behind her back. From this position, she could see everything: the bodyguards at their posts, the glint of Junho's Glock holster visible when he leaned forward, the way the chairman's fingers trembled slightly when he reached for his water glass. Old man's disease, she thought. Parkinson's, maybe, or just age. Mr. Kim appeared with a wooden presentation box, his hands shaking as he approached the table. Chairman Park, we have the honor of presenting the Hibiki 50-year-old you requested for this evening. He opened the box with reverent care, revealing a crystal bottle that probably cost more than a luxury sedan. Junho waved him away. I'll pour. He stood, took the bottle, and carefully filled 2 heavy crystal glasses. The amber liquid caught the light like liquid gold. Junho added ice from a silver bucket, large, perfectly clear cubes that clinked softly against the crystal. Chairman Park smiled, a rare, genuine expression. To the old ways, he said, raising his glass, and to the future of the Park family. Naomi's eyes locked onto the chairman's glass. Something was wrong. The ice, one of the cubes, had a faint discoloration, not yellow like whiskey stain, but a barely perceptible cloudiness that shouldn't exist in ice that clear. It was catching the light differently, refracting at the wrong angle. Her father's voice exploded in her memory. The Muryang clan doesn't use poison in the drink, Naomi. Too easy to detect. They freeze it into the ice, concentrated batrachotoxin from Colombian tree frogs. Looks like a harmless cloud, dissolves in 5 minutes, kills in 3. By the time symptoms start, the toxin's already in the bloodstream. Time slowed to a crawl. Chairman Park lifted the glass toward his lips. The cloudiness was already starting to dissolve, wisps of deadly poison spiraling into the whiskey. Naomi didn't think. Her body moved on pure instinct, 7 years of suppressed training detonating in a single moment. Get down, she screamed. She didn't shove the chairman. He was too far, too heavy. Instead, she grabbed the edge of the massive mahogany table and heaved upward with explosive force, her legs driving like pistons. The table flipped onto its side, crystal and plates shattering in a cascade of destruction. Crack. The sound of breaking glass came from 2 directions at once, the table and the floor-to-ceiling window behind the chairman's seat. A high-velocity bullet punched through the reinforced glass exactly where Park Taeseong's skull had been a second earlier, burying itself in the mahogany with a sound like a sledgehammer hitting oak. Sniper, Junho roared, his Glock appearing in his hand as if by magic. He tackled his father to the ground behind the overturned table, his body shielding the older man. Chaos erupted. The bodyguards drew weapons, shouting in rapid Korean, scanning for threats. Downstairs, guests screamed. Another bullet shattered a light fixture, raining glass like deadly rain. Naomi was on the floor, covered in whiskey and ice, her ears ringing, her heart hammering against her ribs like it wanted to escape. Junho was on top of his father, shielding him, his head swiveling. He looked at the bullet hole in the table, wood splinters radiating outward from the impact point. Then he looked at Naomi. His eyes were wild, adrenaline bright, and absolutely lethal. "Clear, we're clear," one of the bodyguards shouted, pressing his earpiece. "Shooter on the north rooftop, team en route." Jun-ho slowly stood, helping his father to his feet. Chairman Park was pale, gripping his chest, but alive. He stared at the destroyed window, then at the table that had saved his life. Then both men turned to look at the waitress trembling on the floor. Jun-ho moved with terrifying efficiency. Before Naomi could process what was happening, his hand clamped around her uninjured arm like an iron manacle, hauling her to her feet. Glass crunched beneath her shoes. "You," he growled, his voice cold enough to freeze blood. "You're coming with us." "Wait, I saved him," Naomi gasped, trying to pull away. "Exactly." Jun-ho's grip tightened. "Which means you either knew the hit was coming or you're the luckiest waitress in Seoul. Either way, we're having a conversation." "Let me go," Naomi struggled, but it was like fighting against steel cables. Jun-ho was already moving, dragging her toward the service exit where the bodyguards had formed a protective corridor. Chairman Park was being rushed ahead, surrounded by a phalanx of armed men. He looked back once, his dark eyes locking onto Naomi with an expression she couldn't read: suspicion, curiosity, or perhaps something closer to recognition. "Sir, please," Mr. Kim appeared, his face ashen. "The police." "Will be handled," Jun-ho cut him off. "Nobody saw anything, nobody says anything, understand." They burst through the kitchen doors into a narrow alley where 3 armored SUVs idled, engines running, doors already open. The lead vehicle swallowed Chairman Park and 2 bodyguards. Jun-ho shoved Naomi toward the second vehicle. "Get in." "I don't." "Get in." There was no room for negotiation in his tone. Naomi climbed into the SUV, and Jun-ho slid in beside her, blocking any escape. The door slammed shut with a hermetic seal. The interior was leather, bulletproof glass, and suffocating silence. A bodyguard sat in front, separated by a privacy partition that rose with an electronic hum. The convoy pulled away from the Obsidian Vault, slipping into Seoul's nighttime arteries like sharks into dark water. Naomi pressed herself against the door as far from Jun-ho as the confined space allowed. Her uniform was soaked with whiskey, her arm throbbing where she'd hit the ground. She could smell her own fierce sweat mixing with Jun-ho's cologne, something expensive and cold, like winter forests. He wasn't looking at her. He was typing on a secured phone, his thumbs moving with lethal precision. "Perimeter breach. Lock down the Gangnam safe houses. I want names by the time we reach the estate." He ended the call and finally turned to face her. In the darkness of the moving vehicle, his eyes looked almost black. He studied her the way a surgeon studies a tumor, clinically, intensely, looking for the weakness that would let him cut it out. "You flipped a 300-pound mahogany table," he said, his voice flat. "By yourself, without leverage." Naomi said nothing. "And you called the shot before the glass broke." Jun-ho leaned forward, invading her space. "The bodyguards didn't see it. I didn't see it. But somehow, a waitress from," he glanced at his phone, reading something, "Ohio, with no military background, spotted a sniper reflection and reacted faster than trained security professionals." "I was lucky," Naomi whispered. "Luck doesn't move like that." Jun-ho's hand shot out, grabbing her chin and forcing her to look at him. His grip was firm but not painful, controlled violence held on a leash. "Who are you working for? The Muryang clan? The Triads? Or is this something personal?" "I'm not working for anyone," Naomi said, her voice stronger now. "I'm just a waitress who—" "Don't." His thumb pressed against her jaw, just hard enough to remind her he could break it if he wanted. "Don't insult my intelligence. I've interrogated Russian assassins who lied better than you." The SUV turned off the highway, climbing into the hills north of the city. Through the tinted windows, Naomi watched the urban sprawl give way to darkness, punctuated by the occasional mansion fortress. Jun-ho released her face and sat back. "You're going to tell me the truth, Naomi. But first, you're going to meet someone who's very interested in how you saved his life." The convoy slowed, approaching a massive gate flanked by guard towers. Floodlights illuminated razor wire and armed sentries. The gates swung open with mechanical precision, revealing a long driveway lined with ancient pine trees. At the end of the drive sat the Park estate, not a house, but a compound. Modern architecture merged with traditional Korean design, all sharp angles and stone walls, lit from below like a monument to power. It looked like the kind of place people entered but didn't leave. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. 7 years ago, her father had shown her satellite images of this exact location. "If you ever see this place, Naomi," Marcus had said, "run, because the parks don't take prisoners, they take trophies." The SUV crunched to a halt on the gravel driveway. Junho opened his door and looked back at her. "Welcome to the fortress, Naomi. Your life as a ghost just ended." He grabbed her arm again, pulling her out into the cold mountain air. The doors of the main house opened, spilling warm light and shadows. And Naomi realized with crystal clarity that she was walking into the home of the family that had murdered her father. Junho's office was a study in controlled power. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Seoul's glittering sprawl, bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes, and a fireplace crackled with real wood, an obscene luxury in a city where space was measured in billions of one per square meter. The room smelled of tobacco, aged paper, and gun oil. He pointed to a leather chair facing his desk. "Sit." Naomi sat, feeling small in the oversized chair. Her arm was still bleeding where a shard of glass had sliced through her uniform sleeve during the chaos. Junho walked to a sidebar and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He handed her one. "Cognac, it helps with shock." Naomi took the glass with trembling hands. The liquid burned her throat, but warmth bloomed in her chest, steadying her fractured nerves. Junho didn't sit. He leaned against his desk, towering over her, his ice-blue shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his shoulder holster visible. He studied her with those calculating eyes, searching for the crack in her armor. "That cut needs attention," he said, setting down his glass. "Take off your jacket." "I'm fine." It wasn't a request. Naomi reluctantly shrugged out of her uniform jacket, wincing as the fabric pulled against the wound. Blood had soaked through the white sleeve, dark and stark against her brown skin. Junho retrieved a first aid kit from a cabinet and returned, kneeling in front of her. The position should have made him seem less threatening, but somehow it didn't. He was still coiled danger, just at eye level now. He rolled up her sleeve with clinical precision, his fingers cool against her skin. The cut wasn't deep, but it was angry and still bleeding. As he cleaned it with antiseptic, his hand brushed against something at her collarbone. He froze. His eyes narrowed. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for the thin silver chain barely visible above her uniform collar. "Don't," Naomi started, but Junho was already pulling it free. The pendant slid out from beneath her shirt, a small jade phoenix, intricately carved, the green stone so deep it was almost black. It was old, worn smooth by years of touch, and it hung heavy on the delicate chain. Junho's face went completely white. "Where did you get this?" His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a gunshot. Naomi's throat closed. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "Where did you get this?" Junho demanded, his hand closing around the pendant. Not rough, but desperate. "It was my father's," Naomi whispered. Junho's eyes snapped to hers. "Your father." "Marcus Stephen." The name fell from her lips like a stone into still water. "He was your father's silent partner, the ghost, the man who built your intelligence network from nothing, the man your family betrayed." Junho released the pendant as if it had burned him. He stood abruptly, backing away, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. When he turned back, his expression was a war between shock, horror, and something that looked dangerously close to guilt. "Marcus Stephen is dead," he said, his voice hollow. 7 years ago, Busan. We received confirmation." You received what you wanted to hear, Naomi cut him off, standing now, her voice gaining strength. He called me from a burner phone while he was bleeding out in an alley. He told me to run. He told me to disappear. He told me the Parks had burned him to cover their tracks during the prosecution investigation. That's not, Jun-ho stopped, his jaw clenched. We didn't order the hit. But you didn't stop it either. The words hung in the air like smoke. Jun-ho stared at the jade phoenix now resting against Naomi's collarbone. His father had given that pendant to Marcus Stephen 30 years ago, after Marcus had taken a bullet meant for Chairman Park during the Gwangju territorial wars. It was a promise, a blood oath of protection and partnership. And the Parks had broken it. He saved my father's life, Jun-ho said quietly. Multiple times. Everything we built, the shipping routes, the political connections, the offshore networks, it was Marcus's strategy. I know, Naomi said. I watched him build it, I was there. Jun-ho looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the waitress uniform to the trained operative beneath. How old were you? 17, when he died. And you've been hiding in Seoul for 7 years, in plain sight. Jun-ho's expression shifted to something between admiration and fury. Under our noses. I didn't want revenge, Naomi said. I just wanted to survive. Then why save him? Jun-ho's voice cracked. Why save the man whose family killed your father? Naomi met his eyes. Because my father taught me there's no honor in watching an old man die when you have the power to stop it, even if that old man owes you everything. The heavy oak door burst open without warning. Jun-ho's head of security, a man called Kang, stood in the doorway, his face pale and slick with sweat. Boss, Kang panted, we have a problem. Jun-ho was across the room in 3 strides. The shooter. Dead, rooftop sniper, professional. No ID, but we traced his rifle, Czech military issue, stolen from a NATO shipment in 2019. Same batch used by the Muryang clan in the INCHEON Chinese letter hit last year. So it was the Muryang. Jun-ho's voice was cold steel. They're making their move. That's not the problem, sir. Kang's voice dropped to a whisper. The accounts, the offshore accounts, they're being drained. The temperature in the room plummeted. What? Jun-ho's hand moved instinctively toward his weapon. Someone accessed the Cayman system 17 minutes ago. They're transferring funds to ghost companies in Cyprus, Singapore, and the British Virgin Islands. We're talking hundreds of millions, if we don't stop it. How is this possible? Jun-ho grabbed Kang by the collar. We have triple-layer encryption, biometric verification. How did the Muryang get past? It wasn't the Muryang, Kang said, his voice breaking. The access codes came from inside the network, from a verified administrator ID. Jun-ho released him slowly. Who? Kang pulled out a tablet and turned it toward Jun-ho. The screen showed a digital log, timestamps and user credentials scrolling past. At the top, highlighted in red, was a name that made Jun-ho's blood run cold. Han Jong-suk, Secretary to Chairman Park Taesong. Clearance level, Alpha 1. Secretary Han, Jun-ho's voice was barely audible. That's impossible. He's been with my father for 25 years. The evidence is definitive, sir. His credentials accessed the vault 14 times in the past 3 hours. He also approved the catering changes at the Obsidian Vault this morning, the ones that bypassed our usual security screening. Naomi stood up from the chair, her mind racing. He didn't just authorize the hit, he coordinated it. The poisoned ice, the sniper, the timing, all of it. He needed the chairman dead and the accounts emptied before anyone could stop him. Jun-ho turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. Where is Han now? He demanded. Gone, sir, Kang said. He left the estate 19 minutes ago, told the gate security he was going to secure the Gangnam office. He took one of the encrypted laptops and the emergency backup codes. Jun-ho slammed his fist into the desk. The heavy wood shuddered. He's running. He'll cross the border into China by morning, and we'll never touch him. It gets worse, Kang continued, his voice hollow. He changed the master encryption keys 30 minutes ago. We're locked out of our own system. Every account, every transaction, every record, frozen until we can crack the new cipher. Our tech team estimates 72 hours minimum. We don't have 72 hours, Jun-ho said through gritted teeth. In 72 hours, the Park family will be bankrupt. Every rival syndicate in Asia will smell blood in the water. The Muryang, the Triads, the Yakuza, they'll carve us up like a feast. Silence fell over the office, heavy and suffocating. Naomi stepped forward. Show me the system. Both men turned to stare at her. What? Jun-ho asked. The encryption. Show me the lock screen. Kang looked at Jun-ho, who nodded tersely. Kang pulled up a laptop from Jun-ho's desk and opened it. The screen displayed a digital vault door, sleek and modern, with a single text prompt glowing in the center. The prompt was in Korean, but beneath it, in smaller text, was a phrase that made Naomi's breath catch. Ko sonamuenos, ko pudienos, ko mithienos, ko muasienos, ko sumaenos, ko inunkaenos. What hides beneath the roots of the pine? It's a riddle, Kang said bitterly. Han was always into that historical bullshit. He knew the chairman loved old Korean proverbs. He's mocking us with it. Jun-ho leaned over the laptop, his jaw clenched. We've tried everything. Water, earth, blood, shadow, nothing works. We have 3 attempts left before the system wipes itself and we lose everything. Naomi stared at the screen, her father's voice echoing in her memory. The Parks didn't build their empire on money, Naomi. They built it on secrets. And the biggest secret, it's always hidden in plain sight, buried where only the founders would know to look. She knew this riddle, not from Korean history books, but from her father's training. Marcus Stephen had taught her the old codes, the shadow language of Korea's criminal underworld, phrases used during the military dictatorship when syndicate communications had to hide in plain sight. The riddle wasn't asking what was beneath a pine tree. It was asking about the foundation of the Park Empire itself. Move, Naomi said, pushing Kang aside. Wait, if you get this wrong, we lose everything, Jun-ho warned, his hand hovering over her shoulder. Naomi looked back at him, her dark eyes steady. Trust me. She placed her fingers on the keyboard and began to type. Naomi's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her mind racing through fragments of memory. Her father's late-night lessons in their cramped Busan apartment, maps spread across the kitchen table, his voice low and urgent as he taught her the language of survival. The syndicate families don't document their history in books, Naomi. They hide it in riddles, codes, phrases that sound like poetry but are really keys. The Parks started in the coal mines of Tebik during the Japanese occupation. Everything they built came from that darkness. What hides beneath the roots of the pine? Naomi whispered, translating the Korean in her head. Jun-ho stood behind her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. If you're guessing, stop now. We can't afford. I'm not guessing, Naomi said. This isn't a riddle about nature. It's about origin. She turned to look at Chairman Park's office across the hall, visible through the open doorway. On the wall hung a massive painting, a traditional ink landscape of pine trees on a mountain, their roots digging deep into dark soil. But it wasn't soil, not in the painting and not in the park's history. The pine tree is a symbol, Naomi said, her voice gaining confidence. In Korean culture, it represents resilience, longevity, survival through harsh conditions. The Parks use it as their family crest because Chairman Park's grandfather was a coal miner in Tebik. Everyone knows that, Kang said impatiently. It's not exactly a secret. But what's beneath the pine isn't roots, Naomi interrupted. It's what sustained the pine, what gave it strength. The coal seams that the Park family mined for 30 years before they built their empire. Jun-ho's breath caught. The mines. Not just the mines, Naomi said, her fingers moving to the keyboard. The essence of what they pulled from the earth, what covered their hands, their faces, their lungs, what marked them as workers before they became kings. Her father's voice echoed across 7 years. Chairman Park's father died of black lung at 43, but not before he'd saved enough money from the mines to buy his first shipping contract. The Parks never forgot where they came from. They wore that coal dust like a crown. Naomi typed carefully, each character deliberate. Kogutum, Inus. Juyulium. The soot. She hit enter. The screen flashed red. For a horrible moment, Naomi thought she'd failed, that 7 years of hiding, of surviving, of carrying her father's legacy would end here, with a wrong answer and a wiped system. Then the red dissolved into green. Access granted. The vault door on the screen swung open with a digital animation, revealing cascading lines of code, account numbers, transaction logs, the entire financial bloodstream of the Park Empire flowing across the screen in real time. Stop the transfers, Junho barked at Kang. Freeze every account Han accessed, lock him out, now. Kang's fingers flew across the keyboard, sweat beading on his forehead. Revering transactions, initiating emergency lockdown protocol, freezing offshore accounts. The room filled with the rapid clicking of keys, the soft beep of confirmations. Naomi stepped back from the laptop, her hands shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline. Junho stared at the screen, watching billions of one flow back into Park family accounts like a tide revering. When the final transaction was frozen and Han's access revoked, he turned to Naomi with an expression she couldn't quite read, awe, suspicion, and something that looked dangerously like respect. "The soot," he said quietly. "My grandfather's legacy, how did you?" "My father," Naomi said simply. "Marcus taught me everything about the families he worked with, their histories, their codes, their vulnerabilities. He said knowledge was the only weapon that never ran out of ammunition." Kang looked up from the laptop. "Sir, we've recovered 98% of the funds. Han managed to move about 50 billion before we caught it, but the rest is secure. He's locked out completely." "Find him," Junho ordered, his voice cold enough to frost glass. "I want every asset he owns burned to the ground. I want his family tree mapped back 3 generations, and I want him brought to me alive." "Yes, sir," Kang hurried from the room. The office fell silent, except for the crackle of the fireplace. Junho walked to the windows, staring out at Seoul's neon sprawl. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "You saved my father's life, and now you've saved his empire." "Our empire," Naomi corrected, surprising herself. "My father built half of this. His blood is in these foundations just as much as your grandfather's coal dust." Junho turned to face her. In the firelight, his features looked carved from shadow and gold. "Secretary Han has been my father's right hand for 25 years. He ate at our table. He held me when I was a child, and he betrayed us for money." He crossed the room until he stood directly in front of her, close enough that Naomi had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "But you, the daughter of a man we betrayed, you saved us. Why?" Naomi held his gaze. "Because Han's betrayal was about greed. Your family's betrayal of my father was about survival. I understand the difference." Junho reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. His touch was surprisingly gentle for a man who just ordered someone's complete destruction. "You're not a waitress, Naomi Stephen," he murmured. "You never were." "No," she agreed, "I'm not." "Then what are you?" Naomi felt something shift inside her. 7 years of hiding, of making herself small, of being invisible, cracking open like a chrysalis. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and met the eyes of the man who represented everything she should hate. "I'm the ghost's daughter," she said, "and I'm done hiding." The alarms shattered the moment like broken glass. Red emergency lights flooded the hallway, casting everything in hellish crimson. Junho's hand went to his weapon instantly, his entire body shifting into combat mode. "Report," he barked into his phone. Kang's voice crackled through, distorted by gunfire in the background. "Muryang clan. Breach at the south gate, 8-No-12 hostiles, heavy weapons. They're pushing toward the main house. Lockdown protocol, now. Junho was already moving, grabbing Naomi's arm. "Get to the safe room." "No." Naomi pulled free, her voice steel. "Give me a weapon." Junho stared at her. "You're not trained." "My father was Black Ops before he worked for your family," Naomi cut him off. "I could field strip an assault rifle before I could drive. Stop treating me like a victim and give me a goddamn gun." For a split second, Junho hesitated. Then he reached behind his desk and pulled out a Glock 19 from a hidden compartment. He checked the magazine and handed it to her, grip first. "Stay behind me. You see a clear shot, you take it. Understood?" Naomi checked the chamber with practiced efficiency, her hands moving with muscle memory 7 years dormant. "Understood." They moved through the corridor in tactical formation, Junho on point, Naomi covering their 6. The sounds of combat grew louder, the distinctive crack of rifle fire, shouting in Korean, the crash of breaking glass. They reached the main security hub. Monitors showed the estate's perimeter, black-clad figures swarming through the southern breach, cutting down bodyguards with military precision. Chairman Park was already secured in the underground bunker, but the attackers weren't retreating. They were advancing. "They're not here for money," Naomi observed, scanning the screens. "Look at their formation. They're hunting." Junho's jaw clenched. "They're finishing what the sniper started. If they can't kill my father, they'll settle for burning everything he built." An explosion rocked the building. The lights flickered. "East Wing is compromised," Kang's voice came through the speakers. "We need reinforcements." The transmission cut to static. Junho grabbed a spare magazine from the weapons locker and tossed one to Naomi. "We hold the main hall. It's the only route to the bunker, if they get through us." "They won't," Naomi said, racking the slide. They took positions at opposite ends of the grand marble staircase, using ornate pillars for cover. Naomi's heart was hammering, but her hands were steady. This was what her father had trained her for, the moment when survival meant becoming the weapon. The double doors exploded inward. 4 Muryang soldiers stormed through, submachine guns raised. Junho dropped the first 2 with precise double taps. Naomi took the third with a shot to the center mass, then another to the head, textbook Mozambique drill. The fourth dove behind a statue. "Moving," Naomi called, flanking right with fluid grace that had nothing to do with serving tea. She was predatory now, every movement calculated, every breath controlled. The soldier swung around the statue. Naomi was faster, 3 shots. He went down. Junho stared at her, something between shock and admiration flashing across his face. "Where the hell did you learn to shoot like that?" "Langley," Naomi said, ejecting her spent magazine. "My father wasn't just a tactician, he was a teacher. He made sure I could protect myself." More gunfire erupted from the east corridor. Junho's radio crackled. "Sir, we've got a runner. Someone's trying to exit through the north service entrance. Civilian vehicle, moving fast." Junho's eyes narrowed. "Han." He grabbed Naomi's hand and pulled her toward the security monitors. The screen showed a black sedan speeding toward the secondary gate, guard posts abandoned in the chaos. "That bastard," Junho snarled. "He's using the attack as cover. He knew the Muryang would strike tonight." "He probably coordinated it," Naomi said. "Give them the access codes, the security layout, timing, everything they needed, in exchange for safe passage." Junho was already on his radio. "All units, North Gate, stop that vehicle. I want Han alive." They raced through the corridors, past portraits of Park family patriarchs, toward the garage. Junho threw open the door to reveal a collection of vehicles that looked more like a military motor pool than a personal garage. He tossed Naomi keys to a matte black Range Rover. "You drive, I shoot." Naomi caught the keys one-handed and slid into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life. Junho climbed into the passenger seat, pulling an AR-15 from the back. "Go." Naomi slammed the accelerator. The Range Rover burst from the garage like a missile, gravel spraying as they rocketed down the estate's winding driveway. Ahead, Han's sedan was approaching the north gate. "He's not stopping," Naomi said. Then we make him. Jun-ho leaned out the window, braced the rifle against the door frame, and fired. The first burst took out Han's rear tire. The sedan swerved wildly, fishtailing, then crashed into the stone wall bordering the gate. Naomi brought the Range Rover to a halt 20 meters back, engines still running. They approached the crashed sedan with weapons raised. Han stumbled out of the driver's side, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. He was holding a laptop, the encrypted server codes, and his other hand was fumbling for a gun. "Don't," Jun-ho said, his voice colder than a tomb. The AR-15 was aimed at Han's chest. Han froze. He looked at Jun-ho, then at Naomi standing beside him with her Glock steady and professional. Something like recognition flickered across his face. "You," Han whispered, staring at Naomi. "You're the Stephen girl, Marcus's daughter." "Smart," Naomi said. "Too bad loyalty wasn't one of your skills." Jun-ho stepped forward and drove the rifle butt into Han's gut. The older man crumpled, gasping. The laptop clattered to the ground. 25 years, Jun-ho said softly, standing over the man who'd been like an uncle to him. "You ate at our table, and you sold us for what? Money." Han laughed bitterly, blood on his teeth. "You have no idea what's coming. The Muryang are just the beginning. The old families are rising, Jun-ho, and the Parks, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet." Jun-ho's finger tightened on the trigger. "No," Naomi said, placing a hand on his arm. "He's worth more alive. He knows their network. Their plans make him talk." Jun-ho looked at her, then back at Han. Slowly, he lowered the weapon. "Take him to the interrogation room," he said into his radio. "And someone get my father. He's going to want to watch this." Dawn broke over Seoul like a bruise, purple and gold bleeding across a sky still thick with smoke from the Muryang assault. The Park estate was scarred but standing, bodies removed, bullet holes being patched, blood washed from marble floors. The fortress had held. Naomi stood in Jun-ho's office, staring at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. She barely recognized herself. Gone was the severe bun, the downcast eyes, the apologetic posture. Her natural hair fell in loose curls around her shoulders, and she wore clothes borrowed from Jun-ho's sister, black tailored pants and a silk blouse that actually fit her frame. She looked like someone who took up space, someone who mattered. Behind her, the door opened. She turned to see Chairman Park Tae-seong enter, leaning heavily on a cane but very much alive. Jun-ho followed, his expression unreadable. The chairman moved slowly across the room, his dark eyes fixed on Naomi with an intensity that would have terrified her a day ago. Now, she held his gaze without flinching. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to the leather sofa near the fireplace. They sat, Naomi on one end, the chairman across from her, Jun-ho standing like a sentinel between them. "I have been briefed," Chairman Park said, his voice like gravel, "on the events of the past 12 hours. The poison, the sniper, the accounts, the siege, and you," he pointed a gnarled finger at Naomi, "you are at the center of it all." "Abioji," Jun-ho started. "I wasn't finished." The chairman's gaze never left Naomi. "Jun-ho tells me you are Marcus Stephen's daughter, the ghost's child. Is this true?" "Yes," Naomi said simply. "Marcus saved my life in Gwangju in 1987, the chairman continued. "He took a bullet meant for me. He built my intelligence network from nothing. He made me untouchable." His voice cracked slightly. "And we repaid him with betrayal." "You did," Naomi agreed, her tone neither accusing nor forgiving, just factual. The chairman leaned forward, his weathered face illuminated by the firelight. "I did not order Marcus's death, but I allowed it to happen. The prosecutors were closing in and he knew too much. My advisors," he shot a venomous look toward where Han would have stood, "convinced me he was a liability. I was weak. I chose survival over honor." He reached into his jacket and pulled out something wrapped in silk. Slowly, he unwrapped it, revealing a second jade phoenix pendant, the twin to the one Naomi wore. "I have carried this for 7 years," Chairman Park said, his voice rough with emotion. "A reminder of my shame, of the debt I could never repay. He held it out to her. But now his daughter has given me back my life. Twice. She has saved my empire. She has proven herself worthy of the legacy her father built. Naomi stared at the pendant, then at the old man offering it. I cannot bring Marcus back, the chairman continued. But I can give you what should have been his and yours by right, a place at this table, a voice in this family, protection that cannot be broken. He placed the pendant in her hands, closing her fingers around it. You are the shadow of the house, he declared, and anyone who touches you answers to me. Naomi felt something break open in her chest. 7 years of grief, of hiding, of surviving on the margins. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Thank you, Chairman. Call me what your father did, the old man said, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. Haraboji, grandfather. That evening, the great hall of the park estate was filled with the surviving capos, 12 men who controlled everything from shipping to real estate to the shadows where laws didn't reach. They stood in a semicircle, suits immaculate, faces carved from stone, waiting. Chairman Park sat at the head of the long obsidian table, Junho at his right hand. And beside Junho, in a chair that had stood empty since Marcus Stephen's death, sat Naomi. She wore a bespoke suit now, midnight blue, tailored perfectly to her frame, the jade phoenix pendant visible at her throat. Her hair was styled simply but elegantly, and she sat with the posture of someone who belonged. Junho stood, commanding the room's attention instantly. 7 years ago, he began, his voice carrying authority beyond his years, we lost Marcus Stephen, the ghost, the architect of everything we've built. We told ourselves it was necessary, that we had no choice. He paused, his hand moving to rest on Naomi's shoulder, a gesture both protective and declarative. We were wrong, and last night we paid for that mistake with blood. Secretary Han's betrayal, the Muryang assault. We nearly lost everything because we forgot the most important lesson Marcus taught us. Loyalty is the only currency that matters. His fingers tightened on Naomi's shoulder. This is Naomi Stephen, Marcus's daughter, the woman who saved Chairman Park's life twice in one night, the woman who cracked Han's cipher when our own people failed, the woman who fought beside me when the Muryang came for our throats. The capos shifted, uncomfortable, calculating. She is under my protection, Junho declared, his voice dropping to something cold and absolute. She is untouchable. Anyone who moves against her moves against the Park family, and anyone who doubts her place here, his eyes swept the room like a blade, can leave now. No one moved. Junho sat down. Chairman Park raised his glass of whiskey, different whiskey, inspected personally, no ice. To the shadow, the chairman said. May she haunt our enemies and guide our house. To the shadow, the room echoed. Naomi raised her own glass, meeting each man's eyes in turn. These were the men who'd allowed her father to die, and now they were toasting her survival. To the ghost, she said quietly, and to the shadows he left behind. She drank. Later, Naomi stood alone in Junho's office, looking out at Seoul's glittering sprawl. The city looked different from up here, smaller, manageable, like a game board waiting to be played. Junho entered silently, 2 glasses of whiskey in hand. He offered her one. Having second thoughts, he asked. Every single one, Naomi admitted. A week ago I was pouring tea. Now I'm what? A strategist, a capo, your father's adopted granddaughter. You're Naomi Stephen, Junho said simply. Marcus's daughter, the woman who refuses to stay invisible. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The Muryang will regroup, he said. The triads will hear about Han's betrayal and smell weakness. The Yakuza, the Russians, everyone will be watching to see if the parks can hold. Then we make sure they know we can, Naomi said, her reflection in the glass showing someone strong, certain, dangerous. We rebuild the intelligence network. We root out anyone else hand-compromised. We show them that the parks don't just survive, we evolve. Junho smiled, a real smile, rare and devastating. The shy waitress is gone. She was never real, Naomi said. Just a ghost my father taught me to become. And now? Naomi turned to face him, the jade phoenix catching the light. Now I'm the shadow, and shadows. We don't hide anymore, we hunt. Junho raised his glass. To hunting, then. To hunting, Naomi agreed. Their glasses clinked softly, a promise sealed in crystal and whiskey and blood. Below them, Seoul pulsed with neon and secrets. And standing above it all, no longer invisible, no longer afraid, Naomi Stephen claimed her birthright. The ghost's daughter had come home. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and share. Your support means everything. See you in the next video.